Hello everyone, my name is Ashley and I'm with the Virginia Aquarium, and today I'm going to walk you through some different watercolor techniques that you can use while completing our Powerful Waters lesson plan that we have on our website. So with that lesson plan, there is attached a worksheet that walks you through the different techniques that you can use, and then on the back has a section for you to attach those techniques so that you can refer to them while you're completing your painting. So some of the materials that you're going to need to complete this project are a pad of watercolor paper. I'm using some cold press paper here. You can also use hot press paper. It's just different textures that you're going to be able to get. If you don't have any watercolor paper, that's all right. You can use any other kind of thick paper that you might have at home. Just be wary that if you are not using watercolor paper, that might affect how much water you're going to be able to safely use on the paper without causing any damage. The next material that I need is going to be the actual watercolors. I just have a watercolor pan here. Any watercolor set that you might have or paints that you might have from any brand are going to work. I have a pan. You can also use tubes, and there are watercolors that come on sheets of paper. I wouldn't recommend watercolor pencils for this activity because you're not going to be able to get the same effect. Next, you're going to need some brushes. I just have a variety pack of brushes here. Really, if you have two different brushes, you're going to be great. I would recommend a wide brush and then just a smaller brush for fine details. For the different techniques that you're going to do, you're definitely going to need some water here. I just have an empty yogurt container that I've recycled to hold my water. You'll need some tape. I have some tape that's specifically for paint, so you can use any kind of painter's tape that you have at home or this thicker kind of tape. I also have some salt, some crayons, some paper towels, and then I have a ruler and a marker here to help me set up my grid for my techniques. All right, so to get started, I'm going to get my paper out. This nice thick paper here. All right. And you'll notice on the paper there are going to be two different sides to it. One side's going to be a little bit smooth and one side's going to have some texture on it. I'm going to work on the side that has the texture on it so that way I can get the best kind of effects. And I'm going to take my ruler here and I'm going to set it up into a grid of 8 different sections. So 4 on top and 4 on the bottom. And I'm just going to use the actual width of my ruler to set up those grids to make it easy on myself. So I'll put it on my paper here. I'll do my first line. And then I'll move it down and I'll do my second line. It's not super important for these lines to be absolutely straight. It's just what you're using to do your samples to refer to later. I'm going to do each section into 4, so it's going to be easiest for me to actually split my paper in half. So I'm going to see how big my paper is. It's about 9 inches, so that's going to be 4.5. And slide that down here, 4.5. Now your measurements are going to be different than mine depending on what kind of paper that you're using. Again, my paper is saying that it is 9 inches wide, so I'm going to have to do my segments into different sections than you might have to. All right, and then let's see here, 4.5. So I'm going to do 2.25 on each one here. Make it nice and easy. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect. It's just having this a nice area that we can use to do our different techniques and help separate them a little bit better. All right, now my sections are ready to go. So the first technique that we're going to be doing is our wash. And for this one, I'm going to use my wide paintbrush that I have here. And then I'm going to get out another brush that's got more of a point to it. And those are going to be my 2 main brushes for today. So again, you don't have to have a lot of different brushes in order to do the watercolor painting. So I'm going to go ahead and get my water, just get my brush nice and wet here. And I'm going to pick what color I want. Today I'm going to go ahead and do one of my reds that I have here. So I'm going to pick up some of that color and just put it on this palette that's attached to my pan. If you don't have a pan like this with a palette attached, that's absolutely okay. You can use any kind of plate that you might have at home. or anything that can hold the water on top without absorbing it. All right, so I just mixed some of that water in with the paint, and now I'm gonna go ahead and just do a flat wash of color right here in my first square. And all that means is that I'm just going to lay that color flat on the paper. As you can see, there's not a ton of color there, and that's the beauty of watercolors. You can actually control how much pigment or color that you put in for your paints. So you can have it really light or really dark. All right, so my next technique is actually going to be dry brush. So I'm gonna put this brush away, and I'm going to get my smaller brush here because it is dry right now. So it's gonna be perfect for what I need. I'm just gonna put it in this color that I have that's already a bit wet and not add any water to it. Now, if I've got too much color on my brush, I can take some of my paper towel that I have here and use it to absorb some of that color to make my brush even drier. And then I'm just going to take it and put it right on my paper. I might have rubbed a little bit too much color off, and that's fine. I can go back in and do this some more. If it is too dry, which can happen, there is such thing as being too dry with these watercolor and doing a dry brush technique. You can add a little bit of water onto your brush, dry most of it off on your paper or on your paper towel, and then you can go back in to do that technique. And you can see that I'm controlling where I'm putting that more concentrated dry color, and it has a much stronger color to it. So this is great if you want to do things like grass textures. I'm just going to clean my brush there so it's ready to go for our next one. All right, so my next technique is called wet onto wet. And for this one, I'm just going to take my big brush that I have again. I cleaned it off, so all that's on it is water, so you really shouldn't see any color when I lay this down. You might see a little bit. That happens because I'm only using the same brush. And then while that is still wet and saturated, I'm gonna come back to my palette to pick up some color, and I'm going to dab it into the area. And you can see how that watercolor starts to spread with the water that's already on my paper. So our next technique is going to be pretty similar to that. It's called bleeding. And for this, I'm actually going to need two different colors. So I'm going to get my brush nice and clean here, and we'll use two different colors. So let's go ahead and try one of our blue colors. So I'm getting some fresh water, and I'm choosing my blue here. Getting it ready just like I would for a wash. And I'm only going to color half of this section. Now while that's still wet, I'm going to clean my brush off, and I'm going to get my next color. So let's go back to that red again. Again, I'm doing it just like I would if I'm doing a wash, and I'm going to do it right next to that blue. And I'm going to get as close as I can so we can actually see those colors start to bleed together. What sometimes can help with this technique is you can actually move your paper around, and you can see as the colors bleed into each other, or you can use a smaller brush with a little bit of water on it to kind of help those two areas start to mix. Especially if you don't want to get your other brush dirty with the mixed colors there. So our next one is going to be our first resist technique, and I'm going to be using just some crayons here. Your worksheet does say that you can use oil pastels. It's going to have the same effect, just with the oil pastels. It's going to be the oil that pushes away the water or has the water resist. With the crayons, it's going to be the wax that's going to do that instead. So I'm just going to draw like a little flower here. It's not going to be that perfect. I'm actually going to maybe make this solid area. See, just a little flower, and I'll go back in with some of my paints. Now I already have red and blue ready to go, so I just choose whichever one I am most interested in. I think blue will look really good with this purple, and I'm just going to do a wash over it, just like our first technique. And you can see as you do that, the wax will actually physically push away that watercolor. away from that area of the paper. So no color is going to collect where you have the crayon or the oil pastels. All right, get my brush clean again. So for my next one, your worksheet does say that you can use rubber cement for this activity. I don't have any rubber cement to use today, so I'm just going to be using my tape. It has the same effect. Your main goal is just going to be protecting the area of your paper where you don't want the paint to be, and you want to keep the white. With watercolor, it's very easy to add more paint and to add more color, but it's very difficult to take it away to get back to that nice clean white paper. So what you can do is use things like rubber cement or tape to protect those areas, and once the paint's dry, you can remove it. With rubber cement, you would just lay it down on the paper, and once it's dry, paint over it, and then you can use your finger or an eraser to rub away the rubber cement. I'm going to use some tape today, and I'm just ripping it into some different shapes so you can see what kind of effects that you get with it. And then I'm going to do another wash right on top. Some more color. I want this to be nice and saturated. Saturated just means that I have got a lot more color compared to water. Now with tape, it is going to be different than the rubber cement, as the paint will collect around the edges of the tape. So you're going to get a stronger color line there than you would if you were using the rubber cement. And that's absolutely okay. It just kind of depends on what effect you want to create. All right, so for my next one, I'm going to be doing our salt technique. So I'm going to be laying down some more color. This one I'm actually going to do two colors, get them nice and mixed together. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and use that smaller brush so I can get some more concentrated areas of blue here. And this is another form of wet into wet, or bleeding, that I'm doing here. Instead of having two colors right next to each other where they bleed, I'm doing that wet color onto another wet color. So they're still mixing like they would for bleeding, but it has more of that splotchy effect that the wet into wet has. So while this is still wet, that is key. Usually you want it to be very wet with lots of water and color on your paper. I'm going to be taking some of this salt and sprinkling it right on top. And the areas that have the most water and pigment, that salt is going to begin to absorb it, and it's going to create a fun technique. Now this is not always going to work every single time you do it. It is a fine balance of salt to water ratio. And the different salts that you use can actually affect how it looks. So do some experimenting. Try it with table salt, try it with flaked salt, try it with sea salt or kosher salt, and see what kind of effects that you can get. All right. So once this salt is dry, you'll actually be able to knock it away and see the effect that it leaves behind. So for my next technique here, it's going to be our last one that we're doing. This is going to be called lifting. And this is where we remove some of the paint that we have on the paper to lighten those different areas. Now, it's never going to be able to get back to the straight white of the paper. That's what our rubber cement resist or our tape covering here can do, but this can help you to lighten areas, or if you actually make a mistake somewhere and you have color that you don't want it, you can lift it away. So I'm going to do my wash again, and I'm going to go in with some more blue. I'm having fun mixing these colors. I'm making more of a purple color here, and I want some more red. I want this to be really crazy. And then I'm going to just use my paper towel that I've been using today, and I'm going to take it and press it on the paper and lift some of that color away. I can do it lightly, I can do it a little bit more firm to control how much of that paint and water that I remove. So once this is all completed, you're going to have your strips that look like this. So these are ones that I did in advance that were nice and dry. This is my wash, my dry brush, my wet into wet, my bleeding, my resist. This is what it looks like when you take the tape up off your paper. So again, you're going to see some sharp edges. If you have rubber cement, your edges won't be as sharp as that. This is what my salt looks like. So you can see it actually looks a lot like how frost kind of expands onto surfaces during the winter time. So this is a great technique to use if you want to get a frosty look or to mimic things like snow. And then here is my lifting, all nice and dry. So when you have everything dry, you can cut them up into the different squares and attach them to the back of your worksheet here so you can use that as a reference. So that's everything that I have for you guys today. Remember that all of these techniques are just there to help you do the different activities with the watercolor stained glass painting. You don't have to use all of them. Experiment with them and see what works for your techniques. So my name is Ashley and I'm with the Virginia Aquarium, and we'll see you guys again soon.